Good morning and welcome back to News and Views right here on Salam Media, your home of humanitarian journalism. Our next discussion delves into, I think, I can call it a political shakeup within the economic freedom fighters. This is, I think, a very important issue and one that has grappled the headlines yesterday. We'll be speaking about the resignation of Dr. Ndlozi, one of the party's most recognizable figures, has left many wondering about the future direction of the EFF and what might have motivated his departure. But what's interesting is, unlike other recent profile exits from the EFF, many of whom joined the Jacob Zuma-led MK party, Ndlozi's next steps remain very, very unclear. And I think it's adding another layer of intrigue to this developing story. And to help us unpack the implications of this resignation and ultimately the broader dynamics within the EFF, we're pleased to be joined by political commentator Phapano Phasha. Phapano, welcome to Salam Media. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Good morning, and good morning to the listeners as well.
I think with Mbuyiseni Ndlozi, is it safe to say the writing was almost on the wall, especially looking at the EFF's National People's Assembly back in December? Or do we say that was one of the first moments where it was all speculation, but we started seeing the literal cracks, between himself, the party, and ultimately the party leader Julius Malema?
Yeah, I think it has been a long time coming, especially behind the scenes, because was it early this year or last year, after the Moses Mabhida 10-year anniversary of EFF, there were already signs of cracks, especially between the Ndlozi, Floyd, and Julius faction, if I might put it like that.
Mm-hmm.
So it has been a long time coming. But over and above that, if you recall, Ndlozi was the candidate for the EFF and he did not do. Um, and then there were those who had engaged him to contest in the top five of the EFF. And, Julius had his own program and he had his own people. And because of ambitions and other things, unfortunately, Ndlozi was not growing within the party. And so I think he is a career politician now. So he is making his own moves, and the likelihood is that he will be going to MK.
I think that's an interesting speculation because he hasn't resigned completely from the EFF, but he's resigned as an MP. I want to touch a bit on the timing of this. It's the new year. There's a SONA in the next couple of weeks, and the motivation of it also, particularly as the EFF navigates, this wave of defections and almost internal realignments. What do you think might have driven his decision to step down at this particular time?
Well, Ndlozi has already left the EFF.
Mm.
What is just outstanding is for a formal resignation. That is the only thing, and it also is happening because he is no longer in the plans of Julius Malema. And from what I have heard, there is intel that he is engaging with Floyd, and I think this might also be creating the reason why there's a drift between Ndlozi and Malema. So these are internal challenges, and you must also acknowledge that MK is coaching EFF members, whether it's correct or incorrect, but this is what is happening. So there's a level of instability within the EFF and uncertainty.
Mm.
So Ndlozi finds, he's caught in this fight, uh, and we'll see what happens. But he is already gone. It's just the last thing that is just outstanding is for him to formally leave the party.
Mm. I want to touch on his legacy a bit within the EFF. He's the party's first national spokesperson. He played quite a critical role in almost shaping the EFF's public image. From this rowdy, radical political party to one that can be intellectual and unpack discourse. On a round table. I think he was that guy within the EFF. How do you see his departure impact the EFF's messaging and engagement with his base, but not only with his own base, but within the South African political landscape? Because I mentioned on my intro that we, as a South Africa, we need Ndlozi in parliament. He's an integral figure. He plays an important role, and if he doesn't return, we are all that much poorer.
Well, you make quite an interesting observation because if we speak of parliament, and then Ndlozi that we would have known, especially during the Jacob Zuma era, was a Ndlozi who was quite, noisy. I wouldn't say outspoken. I mean, he was part of the group that really, really was in the forefront of removing the former president. And they worked tirelessly with your Safe SA and other organizations, which one would say are part of the establishment. So for me, that's one aspect of it. And I'm not saying that it was actually wrong, but I'm just saying that in terms of what he did, what we primarily know for is the very fact that he was part of this grouping of people who worked, and we know that they were also funded by organizations which wanted to remove President Jacob Zuma. But over and above that, I think it's quite interesting when one looks at the EFF and the question of who is behind the intellectual ideas in the EFF. And I think a lot of gravitas has been given to the likes of Freud and Ndlozi, but there have been other people within the EFF, such as Professor Snokwani and others who have been shaping the policy of the EFF, including the likes of Prof. Malekane. Remember, one other thing is that Ndlozi just got his qualification. He's not a scholar. He's not an academic. And for me, the departure of Floyd and Ndlozi ultimately provides EFF with an opportunity to rebuild, because there are scholars, as I've said, who have been working with the EFF in the background, and some of them have been isolated. I mean, for example, not many people speak about the work that Prof. Chris Malekane has been doing, especially also, including the likes of Angela Mgutama, who was heavily involved in penning the 7 cardinal pillars of the EFF. So there have been people, in particular scholars, who have been behind the EFF. So I'm just saying that, for Mbuyiseni and his public profile, I mean, we were having a conversation, which was a public conversation, a public dialogue. The relevance of Mbuyiseni for me should also have been measured during the elections. EFF, it had a dismal performance in Gauteng. So it will be quite interesting as he forges ahead, because also his profile was also centered on the national leader, who is Julius Malema. And if we go to any other party, which will likely be MK or perhaps the ANC, he would also be heavily reliant on the leadership of those parties. So Mbuyiseni as a standalone, it's quite difficult to determine his influence. But yes, he has been very influential, but not outside of this cult leaders, or this cult leader, which is Julius Malema.
If you are Julius Malema right now, you are the economic freedom fighters. I'm pretty sure the groundwork for campaigning for the 2026 local government elections is already starting. How do you position yourself? How do you start painting this new picture of an economic freedom fighters that is for the first time going into a notable election is without two of its most recognizable figures outside of Julius Malema, which is Mbuyiseni Ndlozi and also Floyd Chivambu. Is it a rebrand? Is it a restructuring? What do you call this phase?
All right. I think remember these people have left, or like Floyd that you have mentioned, he left the EFF when the EFF had performed dismally at the polls, and Ndlozi, with all that is happening and him resigning from parliament, he resigned post the event. So it's not pre any election. So the EFF has an opportunity now because it did badly anyway with these leaders. So they performed dismally with these leaders. So the best thing the EFF has to do is to go back to the drawing board. One, the issue of open borders. The party really, really needs to look at this policy positioning and to see how it's going to postulate it better, because what we are having in the country at the moment is the rise of neo-nationalism, the rise of Afro-pessimism. So what the EFF really needs to do is to start looking at itself and how it positions itself so that it realigns with the needs of South Africans. And it doesn't necessarily have to go xenophobic. It doesn't necessarily have to posture itself as the Patriotic Alliance or the other party of Mashaba. But it needs to look at that strategy, because a lot of surveys do show that the reason why the EFF did very badly at the polls is because of the issue of open borders. But over and above that, the EFF is still seen as a young party. And by the looks of things, the majority of voters, they still rely on culture, they still rely on history, they still rely on eldership. So it's important that the EFF does a perception, and I think at a bigger level, when they do a perception survey, to really look at what are the priorities of South Africans, and their election strategy must actually speak to that. Because I think the EFF, especially towards the national elections, was far detached from the daily needs of South Africans. But lastly, I think on a leadership level, the EFF really needs to bring in new people. Because I think also at the heart of, the challenges or the manner in which the electorate looks at these political parties are based political parties. The many matured people, professionals, academics, and business people who would not vote for the EFF because it's seen as a very hostile political party. It's seen as a party which is volatile, which is always, fighting. So I think the EFF at that level really needs to reposition itself as a party which can be taken seriously. So I think that's where the EFF is. And it has that opportunity, because when the people leave, then they can start to restructure themselves.
No, definitely. You mentioned something about, a very, very big possibility that Mbuyiseni Ndlozi might be defecting to the MK. You said there's intel that he's in, communication with Floyd. Do you think this catapulting almost of these leaders or these people from other political parties, mainly the EFF, who come with these big profiles, being catapulted into these big positions within the MK, will in not such a long time start creating discontentment within what I can call the original members of MK, those who are on the ground, those who are within branches, who feel, hey, we've been here since the beginning of this thing. We are not considered for major top positions or, parliamentary positions. But then you have these people from the MK, from the ANC, or whatever political party they're from, and they're just thrown in and, being given positions. And it's happening, we've seen it happening with the EFF, a few times, but with the MK and the speed that is happening, and just how much of the different people are coming in at this rate, it's becoming a bit concerning. You don't think there's going to be little voices that are unsavory within the MK that are going to start pointing them out, and that might cause a bit of instability within the party?
Well, what's quite interesting is that just recently, the spokesperson of MK and Ndlozi also resigned from parliament to be not necessarily. He is part of the national what is called the national interim leadership of MK. So he's part of the top 8. He sits in their meeting, and he did that specifically because there has been a vacuum between those who started MK and newcomers like Floyd, including the nephew of President Zuma, who was also a member of the EFF at some point. From the EFF, he was on the EFF list. He didn't make it to parliament. And then after that, he then joined MK post the last elections. So people like Makazala Mzobe, in fact, it was Makazala Mzobe, after he left EFF, went to MK, became the advisor of the president. He brought in Floyd, and that's why you are seeing an influx. But it's with MK in the world. So I know part of the engagement that army were coming in and they are taking. It will be quite interesting because what MK also wants to do is to legitimize itself only as a regional party in KZN or a tribal party only made up of Zulus. So a person like Mbuyiseni comes from Gauteng. He is from Orange Farm. Your Floyd is from Diani, originally in Limpopo. So what you are actually bringing in is you are bringing in different people who have a national profile, obviously, and who are not from KZN. But however, MK would need to deal with these issues. The challenge, however, for MK is what happens post President Zuma, because he is obviously 82 years old and you can't defy nature. So the question is, what will happen? Because President Zuma is the one who is enabling all these people to actually come in and find expression. But within those, as I said, who were part of the elections, who ensured that MK gets over 14% of the votes, there has been a lot of disgruntlement. So how the party is able to survive all of these things, it's going to be quite interesting. But as I was also saying, these are careerists. The very fact that they are resigning from parliament or leaving the EFF post-election results tells you a lot. Means that the results or the bad or the dismal performance of the party is the rationale why they are leaving, because the packs, the same packs that they used to get are not there. They have lost a lot of relevance, and they are now joining this new party, which is in everybody's mouth. So it will be quite interesting. But I think lastly, when it comes to MK, the most dominant person in MK is Ndlozi Zuma. So how they are able, to engage with her, the relationship that they're able to form with her, it will be quite critical for their survival, especially the likes of Floyd or Mbuyiseni, because you cannot outcompete, if I might call it the masters who are currently in charge of MK. So it's because, again, I think they are moving from one cult to the other, because really democracy, it's not a party that has gone to the polls. And with the last press conference, MK did clearly say that they're not going to an elective conference anytime soon. So these are the dynamics that I think they would really have to grapple with. But the most interesting dynamic is what happens post, when President Zuma passes away. What is going to happen to the party? Yeah.
No, I think we're going to leave it on that note, Phapano. Thank you very, very much for your insightful analysis. And I think, yeah, you make quite an important point. Everyone that's defecting to the MK, and it looks like we said it's going to be the latest one. What's going to happen post the Jacob Zuma era? Will MK still remain what it is now? Or, will we see changes internally, whether good or bad? So really interesting times ahead. Phapano, thank you so much. Really appreciate it, and I'm sure we'll be catching up in the not so distant future again.
Okay, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much.
There you have it. That was our political commentator, Phapano Phasha. And yeah, we want to hear from you. What do you think? Do you think we said Ndlozi will be joining the MK? Like Phapano is saying there. She's saying, well, she has intel that, well, he's been communicating constantly with Floyd Chivambu. So there's a very, very big possibility that after resigning as an MP, ultimately he'll be resigning as a full-fledged member of the EFF. So yeah, what do you think? I would love to hear your thoughts. Connect with us on our various social media pages, or you can share, you can share with us, voice note or message. Our studio line is 0116800355, and WhatsApp line is 0617660355. What do you think it's next for Mbuyiseni Ndlozi? Because it looks like he has both feet at this moment out of the EFF, and for the first time since its inception in 2013, the EFF could ultimately, go. Well, it's not ultimately; it's definitely going to the local government elections without two of its most recognizable figures outside of Julius Malema. How do you think that is going to affect them? Hey, an EFF canvassing without a Floyd, an EFF canvassing without a Mbuyiseni Ndlozi, just Julius. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, News and Views continues after this.